Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, your source of strategies and insights to make you a better leader. Influence, improve, inspire.
Here we go. Hey, it's Zoe, and I am here today with Daniel Levine, a very special Canadian. I'm very excited to be interviewing Canadian. Makes me feel all kind of homesick and stuff. But Daniel is a Canadian entrepreneur and co-founder of the tech startup MinuteBox, which is a cloud-based minute management system to help with corporate compliance. The other exciting thing about Daniel, he's got a legal background, which I'm curious to hear a little bit more about. How do you go from lawyer into tech? Maybe it's related, I'm not sure, but interesting story there. And he's also the co-founder of Fireside Conference, which is such a brilliant idea. And we're going to hear a lot about this innovation, this new kind of experience that Daniel is creating in his community to help people spearhead their leadership and what they're doing in their businesses. So welcome, Daniel.
Thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be on your podcast and really excited. I was hoping to speak to an Australian, and to know that I have a countrymate is just as exciting. So thank you for having me.
Well, I am Australian. I'm imported. I'm actually a legal Australian now. I had to become a citizen. I had to pledge my allegiance. Actually, you don't pledge your allegiance to the flag here in Australia, but you do have to swear oaths to be a loyal citizen, and it makes you eligible for things like the draft. You can get drafted into the army, and you can get called up for jury duty, and you have to vote. It's compulsory voting here. So those are some of the responsibilities as an Australian citizen.
Wow. And when's the last time you came to visit us back home?
I had a little dip through Canada a year before last when I stopped off in Calgary to visit some friends and my brother. And we went to the Kananaskis ski lodge there, and it was bloody freezing.
Oh, fantastic. I can imagine.
It was minus 30. And it's been ages since I was in that kind of temperature, and glad to be in the mild climate of Australia, that's for sure.
Well, we're finally starting to turn around the weather here for summer. So we have a little bit of a reprieve from the winter, and then we're back to some tormenting weather.
Yeah, right. Well, Toronto is mild anyway, so compared to Winnipeg where I grew up. So whatever. Toronto softies. In any case, let's hear your story. So tell me a little bit about how you went from studying law to doing this big tech startup. What's your journey, and what are you doing now?
So it's funny, you said in the intro, I can't quite understand how someone could go from being a lawyer into tech, but the story actually goes the other way, which is that I was in tech, then I went into law, and now I've dipped my toes back into tech and entrepreneurship. So I have a long history of working in the startup and tech world. In fact, my whole family has quite a history of working in the tech world. Both my older brothers are technology entrepreneurs and software developers. And I spent many years as an entrepreneur working in technology and in media. And a number of years ago, I decided to turn paths a little bit and go to law school, which was a fantastic journey here in Canada, and have been practicing law for a number of years. I'm a litigator. I practice mainly in the area of family law. I do a little bit of civil litigation and criminal law as well. And it was after doing a year, or we do about 10 months of what are called our articles here in Canada, which is sort of an apprenticeship that you do after graduating law school in order to get your law license. And you tend to do a lot of unglamorous sort of legal work when you're doing your articles. And one of the things that they tend to ask you to do is to find and look through these things called minute books. And I don't know the nomenclature that you'd have down in Australia for them, but they are basically corporate record books. And they contain all the information that tells you about any particular corporation from their moment of inception, pretty much their birth. And a good analogy would actually be the birth certificate called the Articles of Incorporation, and they sort of start in that binder. And as the corporation grows through time, all the documents that relate to the corporate governance of that corporation, such as the bylaws and appointing of directors and issuing shares, these all go into what are called the minute books. And minute books are typically kept in a lawyer's office. And if you go to a big law firm and downtown Sydney or downtown Toronto, and you go into a lawyer's office, there'll be a room somewhere in the corner that's a little hard to get to, but it could be quite big. And it will just have record after record for every corporate client that the firm manages. And oftentimes they're out of date and they're a bit dusty and they're kind of hard to find. It's sort of like the library system and they get out of order. And as an articling student, it's usually your job to find it, to review it, to make sure it's all up to date and everything's been done properly. And it's a tremendous headache.
Is this still happening? Like, are you serious? All this offline stuff is still going on over there?
Well, lawyers, in my respectful view, tend to operate, I'd say, at the very least, about a decade behind. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's easy to laugh at, but there's a lot of reasons for that. So, for example, when I was working in a big law firm a number of years ago, I think it was probably Windows Vista that was out at the time, or it might have been even one of the more modern ones. And I think we were still on Windows 95 or 98. And so they're always about 3 or 4 or 5 generations of software behind. And the reason is usually because of things like security. So when a law firm is operating at scale with hundreds of lawyers or thousands across the globe, they have to be very concerned about stability and security of the tools that they're relying on. And they're often unwilling to change because every change you make, there's a whole permutation of other things, usually risks, that come out of that. It's sort of like the known is better, or the known is better than the unknown. And in many cases, you don't know what the unknown is when you're doing software upgrades and updates. And so they tend to be on all of this old software. And it's really quite terrible. And so that's also why they tend to deal in paper records quite a bit. I think the legal industry is probably one of the few that still really, really relies on fax machines. It's probably the number.
Oh my God, that's not. Oh my God, Canada is so behind.
Well, if only we could all be like Australia. But maybe there's a few industries that are still even using dot matrix printers. It's an unbelievable thing.
You're hurting me.
I rented a car not that long ago, and when I went in to get my rental, they were printing out my rental certificate on dot matrix printer, and I just couldn't believe it. But when you build these big systems and you rely on them and they work, you tend to stick with them because even a small change can give you a whole host of permutations that you're not yet ready to overcome or probably can't overcome. But one thing that is happening in the legal industry and industries all around, which is quite interesting, is that because of the browser and the way the browser is used today and the security risks that necessarily follow from the use of the internet and particularly operating within the browser, whether it's for email or other services, you actually need to make sure they sort of flip the coin, which is that to get the best security, it's now no longer making sure that you're on the oldest system that you know is secure. You actually need to be on the latest browser that has the most secure updates and fixes all the critical bugs. And so we're seeing a fairly big tectonic shift in legal technology today. And we're kind of right at the cusp of major law firms globally and around the world taking a dive into legal tech, which is the new nomenclature. New law and legal tech are the new hashtags that are being used to describe emerging trends in legal technology. And that's where MinuteBox was born, which is what I've been working on for the last year, which is a cloud-based system to allow lawyers and law firms globally around the world to allow them to manage their minute books in a digital format that is far more secure than anything that they have in their paper system today. And it's funny, when you go into a law firm, many lawyers still perceive the internet and digital and cloud to be less secure than the physical. And the moment you convey to a lawyer that if there's, God forbid, a fire, a leak, the air conditioning goes down and there's a couple drips in the wrong direction, their entire record systems are gone. And that's actually happened to a law firm here in Toronto not that long ago. Ugh. And so it's sort of only now finally that lawyers and law firms are starting to wake up and realize that they need to take this shift seriously, and not just for themselves, but for their clients, to make sure that they are giving a level of integrity to the documents that they store on behalf of clients.
Look, I think that's absolutely crazy that that's still happening over there.
I completely agree.
So I have something that'll be helpful to you. My husband is actually a family lawyer here in.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And their firm is, in comparison to what you've described, well ahead of the game. They went paperless a few years ago. So they do everything in court on their iPads. They've got all their systems in the cloud. And they've even got an AI that is doing a lot of assessments for people's divorces. So you can get online,
really?
Plug in your data, and you can get an assessment from their AI, which is, a lot of the stuff you've heard probably, how lawyers who do data crunching or as you said, article research, it's all gone with AI, and they've incorporated it. So his firm would be a really good case study for you, I reckon.
I would love to chat with him and the firm and see what sort of tools they're utilizing, because here in Canada, although there are some forward-thinking lawyers and law firms, it is still quite difficult to get away from paper.
All right, I'll hook you up afterwards, but and put you in touch with them, and you
Great.
can have a chat to them, see what they're doing. So that's really cool. So I understand now how law and tech came together. That makes a hell of a lot more sense to me. So now you're in the kind of the tech startup space. So tell me about Fireside. Like that, I'm really excited about this whole event. So tell me how the idea for that came about and where we're up to now with it.
Well, tell me, do you go to many conferences?
I have been to many different conferences. I tend to speak at them rather than attend these days. And every time I was speaking at a couple week before last, actually. And the typical conference, and this is probably what your experience has been, is you get fire hosed with speaker after speaker after speaker after speaker, and then you go home with your head spinning. Yeah. So not great experience, really. Yeah. So tell me.
The desire to create something like Fireside came about actually just as I was starting to enjoy and grow in my legal career, but at the same time, I was looking backward a little bit at the entrepreneur and tech career that I had been involved with for many years, and was starting to miss it quite a bit. And so I started going to a lot of meetups and conferences around Toronto. And there are some really, really incredible ones. And we have a really, really great, really strong tech community here in Toronto. And I kept bumping into someone named Stephen Pulver. And first I noticed him from afar a couple times. And then a few conference and events later, I started chatting with him. And we had known each other for a number of years. We had crossed paths once before at overnight camp, where I had gone for a year and he had gone for about 25 years. And funny enough, we'd actually crossed paths in law school, where he was a couple of years ahead of me, but we had never really become friends. And it was only upon seeing him so many times at different events in the city here in Toronto that we started up a conversation. And I kind of said to him, why are you here? You're a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. We don't really belong here at this tech meetup. What brings you here? And we realized we had this shared passion and shared history of being involved in startups and technology. And we had both had this strong desire to sort of keep one foot into that door, because it was a huge passion of ours. And as we got to talking, we started talking about camp, because that's where we had first met, although, as I say, we didn't really become friends when we were at camp. And we were also talking about being at the conference. It was kind of awkward. We had our name tag. Hello, my name is Daniel. And we had been exchanging business cards with a number of people. What can I sell you? What can you sell me? And I think at the time we were eating a really crappy chicken wrap. It was sort of overloaded with mayo and an old tomato and some really straggly lettuce. And I think I'd given Stephen my one drink ticket that they gave me when I got in there, because, when you go to a conference, of course, you get that one free drink ticket. And we had just left listening to a speaker, and it was a fantastic speaker, someone who we admired and respected and had wanted to connect with. But we were at the back of the line when everyone was lining up to ask the one little question that they get that 15 seconds to ask the question and probably don't get too much of a response. And off the speaker went into the green room, which you're probably familiar with since you've been speaking at a lot of conferences, the VIP green room that only the speakers get to hang out in. And it was at the same time that Stephen was talking about this love of camp that we both shared and his desire to be a camp director one day. And so we thought, you know what? screw this, screw the conferences that we're at. We like these people, but we don't like being in a concrete building with all of those things that I just told you about. So why don't we go back to the camp that we grew up at, rent it out for a weekend, and invite our networks in entrepreneurship, in the startup ecosystem, in technology to come and join us. And so we did that 5 years ago, and we had 60 people come and join us. It was a really small gathering. We rented out the whole camp, 750 plus acres, with a beautiful private lake. And we just gathered around the fire and we talked, and we were able to share real stories of entrepreneurship, not the stories that we sometimes get up on stage that may lack authenticity or maybe more salesy and pitchy. We actually had a very strict no pitching policy. And what came out of the weekend was absolutely magical. So you mentioned in our conversation before we started talking that you went to camp for some 9 years.
Oh yeah. I worked at summer camp for 8. So I went as a kid and as a summer camp kid for a few years, did canoe tripping for many different summers, and then went back to work there. Yeah.
I absolutely adore canoe tripping. It's one of my favorite aspects of camp. And we've been talking about doing a big canoe trip with some folks in our network as well. So I don't need to sell you and tell you about the magic of camp. There's, especially overnight camp, there's something about being at overnight camp that is truly magical. Some of my closest friends in life today, even ones that I don't see all that often, are friends of mine that I made when I was at camp for 1, 2, 3, 4 years. And I don't know if it's the informality of it, the fact that we all walk around in sweatpants, or that we're all in this one sort of self-enclosed area where we don't leave and retire back to our homes or hotel room at night. But something about it brings people together in a really authentic and magical way. And that's why we started Fireside about 5 years ago. And this year, we're going to run our 4th event where we're going to have 400 people from actually around the globe join us, including Australia. So actually, a quick shout out to our friend Chris O'Halloran from Australia, who's coming back.
Cool.
And it's really just a fantastic thing to have been a part of and to grow. And we're excited for this upcoming year.
Well, I have to tell you, like, summer camp is not a thing here in Australia. It doesn't exist.
Oh, really?
No, it does not. There are holiday camps, but there is not summer camp per se. And that's because summer here runs over Christmas and New Year. So what tends to happen in summer holidays is that kids hang out with their family. And they might go to sports camp. They might go to tennis camp or volleyball camp or whatever. But there's no kind of like place where you can go and just spend the summer, like at a lake or whatever. There's nothing that has the same sort of experience. So
maybe that's why Chris enjoyed it so much.
Oh my God, absolutely. So kids here, sometimes they might go on school camp. So their camp might go to camp, and they'll do a week-long educational outdoorsy activity. And that varies depending on the school and the experience, how effective it is. I was talking to my nephew yesterday, and he was hateful towards his experience because the instructor didn't know where we were going. I froze. We walked 20 Ks with 20 kilos on our back, and he was just whinging completely about it all. I'm like, that is just so sad. He just never got the true experience of what you're describing as the magic, which the magic is a shared experience in beautiful surroundings where you're on an adventure and all you have is but to connect with each other in a beautiful environment. And I've brought that to life in the work that I do now. So I take a lot of my leaders away on outdoor trips. We've got one coming up in September on the Lara Pinta Trail, which is out of Alice Springs, which is an extraordinary place out in the middle of Australia.
What are the dates of that trip?
September 6 to 9.
That's exactly our date. So that's both great and unfortunate that you won't be able to join us. But I'll be thinking of you during Fireside then.
Yeah, you'll be having your camp out. I'll be having my camp out under the stars in the beautiful center of Australia. Yeah, it's extraordinary experience, and so few people do it. And I love the fact that it's like summer camp for adults that you've created around this experience. So you're this is your 3rd one coming up, is that right?
This will be our 4th one coming up. 4th.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So what have you learned? So, like, you come up to 4th year, what have you learned about putting on an experience like this? Like, what are some of the benefits to the participants? And we'll start with that. What are some of the benefits to the participants?
So we've learned so much. I could talk about what we've learned for hours and hours, but when it comes to the participants, there is a magic that comes about from the authenticity of the relationships that are formed. And it's not just about being up at camp. All of those elements of the environment play a huge role in it, but it's also the way that it's facilitated. So there are a few key things. One that I already mentioned, the idea that there's no green rooms or VIP areas. So if you, and it's a proverbial you, if anybody comes to Fireside, whether you are engaged in a role as a speaker and contributing in that respect, or any other role, we consider you an attendee first. And what that means is there's no VIP areas, no green rooms. Everyone stays in camp cabins together. There's no special VIP area for speakers. And we also only invite speakers that are with us for the entire weekend. And what that means is there's no one jumping in, coming for a couple of hours and then jumping out. And what happens when you do that is you lose the opportunity to actually connect with those individuals in a way that is, as I keep saying, truly authentic. And when you limit the amount of time that you're at an event like that as a speaker, what ends up happening is, and I'm sure this happens to you, people rush you for the selfie. They want to get that photo with you because you're a celebrity, and they want to send out to their Twitter and their Instagram and their social media, hey, look who I'm with. But not only do we have a no pitch policy up at Fireside, we actually have no cell phone reception. So there's no live tweeting and live snapping and Instagramming, and there's no risk of the impromptu selfie because no one carries their cell phones around. But there's another thing that we do that I think is perhaps the most impactful. And it's funny, many of the things that we do came about accidentally. And when I say accidentally, I sort of mean without intent, because in our first year when we did this, we were sort of just doing it for fun to bring our networks together. And we really didn't have a budget for anything. And I mean anything. We couldn't afford name tags. Okay, you could probably go to the dollar store and pick up name tags. We couldn't afford name tags. I think in our first year, we lost probably about $30,000 or $40,000 on the event. Oh. We weren't doing it for the money. We were doing it to bring the community together. And because we didn't have name tags, it meant no one knew who anyone was. So what do you have to do when you have no cell phone to retreat to pretend like you're browsing the web at a conference and you don't have a name tag? You have to introduce yourself to somebody. And you just say, hey, how are you? Nice to meet you. I'm so-and-so. Who are you? And what's interesting is you tend to not get a lot of and what do you do? Or who are you? One of the things at conferences that I hate more than anything is the awkwardness of when someone peers down at your name tag to see who you are and what company you come from, to validate to themselves whether they want to talk to you. And because of that, everyone that's at Fireside tends to form relationships with people on a people basis first and foremost before anything else, because you don't know who it is that you're approaching. It could be a first-time entrepreneur who has literally zero experience in business, or it could be someone with a business with a market cap of $5 or $10 billion. It could be literally anybody, and that's the beautiful thing. I'll share an anecdote with you from, I think it was our second year. I won't name the person, but they are an extremely successful entrepreneur who founded a company that now has a market cap of about $3 to $5 billion. I don't recall the exact numbers. And they're an incredible visionary entrepreneur. They also have a passion for astrophotography, as it happens. And where we host the event, we have some of the clearest skies in Canada to look up at the stars. It's truly beautiful. And so on the Friday night of Fireside, this individual stood up, having met maybe a handful of people, and with no one really knowing who they were, and said, hey, if anyone wants to come with me at 12:30 in the morning, I'm going to be up at nearby the mess hall, and I'm going to do some astrophotography. We can take some photos of the Milky Way. I'll show you how you can get under the Milky Way. And of the 285 people in attendance, I think about 15 to 20 followed this somewhat quizzical individual out late at night to go shoot some photos of the stars, while everyone else was sitting around the fires and enjoying late night snack, and the DJ was playing some music, and so a lot of people went to the fun party. And some people had this magical experience with this somewhat awkward, quizzical person photographing the stars. I don't think anyone bothered to ask him his name. Or if they did, they probably didn't make the connection to who he was. And the next day, Saturday afternoon, late afternoon at around 5 p.m., we had our big keynote talk. And up he walked onto the stage and started to tell his story about who it is that he is. And it was incredible. Looking around the room, you could identify exactly who those 15 or 20 people were that had spent the night shooting photos of the stars with him, because they couldn't believe that they had this authentic relationship under the stars with this person, only to find out the next day that he was literally the headline speaker and a brilliant entrepreneur that founded a company worth multiple billions of dollars.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So the question is, are you still doing no name tags, or have you introduced name tags?
No, we are still doing no name tags. As I say, we learned a lot of things from our first year when we had no budget. And another one of those things, funny enough, is I mentioned there's no cell phone reception. And it was about a week before our first event with 60 people that Stephen, my co-founder, who's amazing, he turned to me and he said, "Should we rent a satellite truck?" And I said, "A satellite truck? That's going to be $5,000 to bring them up for the weekend. We don't have the budget for that. We don't have the budget for name tags." And so we sort of laughed nervously. What were we going to do without a satellite truck? If people wanted to check their cell phone or phone home to their business and see how things were going. And so we just went with it. And as it turned out, we developed this idea called disconnect to connect. And what we didn't know at the time was that there was going to be this emerging trend of digital detoxes and getting away from the screens and not sitting on Twitter throughout a conference. And as a result, not only were the connections that formed during that first event exceptionally strong on account of the fact that we had no cell phone reception, but it actually became core to our culture. And a huge key differentiator for us from other business conferences is the idea that we eschew technology for the weekend. I mean, how ironic is that we bring together some of the brightest technologists from around the world and we say, hey, guess what? There's no technology. And by the way, that extends. It's not just cell phones. We didn't have budgets for stages, for lighting, for microphones, for projectors. So when we have a keynote speech, there's no PowerPoint presentation to stare at. You have to engage with the other human being that's delivering a message. And it's turned out to be a wonderful thing. So a long way to say, yes, we have the budget now for name tags, but we still don't use them.
That's awesome. So tell me, what happens? You've mentioned that you've got some keynote speakers. You've mentioned that you sit around the fire. What else? What's the structure of the days?
So it's actually quite unstructured. We have a little bit of a choose your own adventure mentality. The owner of Camp Walden, which is where we host the event at Camp Walden, Ontario, we had him on our podcast about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he said something that was quite brilliant to me. He was telling a story about an interaction with his mother and talking about a dinner and a family gathering. And he said, "Mom, is it going to be a good dinner?" And she said, "I don't know. All I can do is set the table." Right? And that's actually the metaphor that we realized uncovers a lot of what we do at camp is we set the table. So we try to bring in and curate amazing people. We open the camp up for all activities. If you want to go water skiing, canoeing, kayaking, if you want to play board games or go rock climbing, if you want to go zip lining or play soccer, you could do whatever you like. And we curate talks. So we bring in amazing people that are attendees first, but have something of value to share, whether it's how to grow and scale your business or how to speak to the media, how to raise venture capital, how to build amazing team culture. We bring people that have figured these things out together, and we set a rough schedule. But it's a beautiful choose your own adventure where you can go down to the lake and watch a keynote presentation at the amphitheater by the lake, or you can actually go into the lake and actually watch a talk in the lake, because we say to all the people that are facilitating talks, hey, we have a 750-acre property filled with amazing areas where you can do this, whether it's the treehouse or in the canoes. And so some people take people out in the canoes and they'll do their talk there. But at the same time, camp is open. So if you want to skip out with a couple of people that you met that morning around the breakfast table and just play some tetherball or volleyball, you can go and do that. A couple other things that we do is it's all inclusive. So when you arrive at camp, you don't need to bring a wallet. You show up, we take care of everything, every meal, every snack. Alcohol is all you can drink throughout the weekend. It's your bedding and your cabin accommodations are taken care of. So all you need to do is show up with an open mind, and we will provide you all the outlets to help that open mind express itself appropriately.
Cool. And so did that structure work for a small group of 60 as well, where you could disappear and choose your own adventure? Or what tended to happen in the smaller group? Did they kind of stick together or did they disperse?
So it's funny, there's one element of Fireside that we can't control, and that's the elements themselves. And in our first year, when we were 60 people, we had the one bad weekend in September. And when I say bad weekend, it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't what you're thinking of with sunshine and rainbows up at camp. So we had moments of rain and downpour, and we had some cold weather. And so that group really stuck together because they literally had to huddle around the fires. And so there was a little less canoeing that weekend, but it was through that weekend of bad weather in our first year that we came up with another philosophy of ours, which is about owning discomfort. And the idea is that when you're up at camp and you're a technologist or startup founder entrepreneur that's used to having it your way all the time and used to showing up to a conference and staying at the Four Seasons or the Ritz-Carlton and having every need of yours catered to by your assistant and your executive team, well, when you show up at Fireside, there isn't any of that. And not only is there not any of that, but it might get a little rainy and it might be a little cold and there might be bugs and you might get a little bit muddy. And as a result of that, we try to put forward this message of owning your discomfort. And it's actually that adversity of discomfort that tends to bring the group really tightly together. So our first year group, despite the fact that they didn't do too much sailing, they're actually probably our strongest alumni group to date, on account of the fact that they spent the most time together around fires with blankets around them roasting marshmallows. And it still turned out to be a pretty nice, beautiful thing because it propelled us into where we are now.
I love that element. And it's a crucial one, actually. So to be uncomfortable with discomfort is actually a key leadership premise in leading in the VUCA world that we're in, the volatile, uncertainty, can't remember what the C stands for, ambiguity. And so being able to be comfortable with discomfort is actually a critical leadership thing. And it's also a key factor in bringing groups together. When you go through adversity together, you create this kind of connection that doesn't exist if you're just sitting side by side in a conference room. So I love that. I love that.
Do you do anything like that at your events to help bring the group together?
So I've run 2 events, and it's called the Edge of Leadership Unconference. And the first year we ran it at the Hyatt. So it was like a conference, really. So the unconference part was freeing up the agenda so people could actually connection.
And that's a critical thing to do, I think.
Yeah. So rather than fire hosing them with topic after topic, we loosened it up a bit. Last year, or actually March of this year, just gone a few months, we changed our venue. We went to a school camp venue called Green Hills, which has similar. It has no phone reception. It's out in the wilderness area, and it's got a ropes course. We didn't use any of the activities, though. So this is our downfall. It's like we had it in the setting, but we didn't campify it, if you like, or adventure it up enough. So what we're looking now for 2019 is a venue and activities that we can have more like that. So in terms of my event, we haven't done it necessarily. In terms of the expeditions that I run as part of my leadership programs, yes. We go out and we're sleeping in swags under the stars. We are out of the elements. The last one, which we ran in May, was also on the Lara Pinta. We got up at 2 a.m. to go climb Mount Sonder, which is this huge mountain, which gives you a panoramic view of the whole area. And there was a lot of hardship that night. That was pretty tough. It was cold and long. So we incorporate elements of that. My background when I got to Australia was to work for Outward Bound, and the the discomfort was probably a lot more severe than it is with the trips that I do nowadays. Like Outward Bound is really about overcoming and testing your limits, whereas the kind of walks I'm doing they're not really that hard, but they will push you into discomfort. So I think I'm getting a little bit softer as I get older. So there's elements of that, but I want people to be able to participate as opposed to like resist coming along. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you need to set people up on a path to success, but put some barriers in their way so that they feel like they've achieved something.
Absolutely. So I'm interested about boundless leadership, where leaders can look at their own challenges and see barriers and overcome them. When you're putting something together like this, what are some of the things that you had to overcome?
Oh, wow. Well, there's many things. I mean, for one, we came into the event space literally knowing nothing about putting on events. I don't have an event background, and nor does Stephen. And so we had to learn a lot on the fly. But I think that at the same time really was one of our biggest strengths, which was that we weren't resting on a pedigree of knowledge about how you're supposed to run events. And so we sort of had to do everything based on whatever our own ideas and intuitions were. And as a result, we were able to craft something quite unique, which is quite nice. We've certainly had our fair share of obstacles over the years, and many of those obstacles have formed some of the ways that we do things today. For example, I recall in our second year, we had our keynote speaker cancel the night before the event. And so that was certainly not a fun email to receive. And many people had actually purchased their ticket on account of this individual coming. And again, I won't say their name because I don't want to embarrass them or call them out. And it ended up being a great event in any case. But what we learned from that is that speakers can't be the pillar that drives people to come to our event. And so if you go to firesideconf.com today, you're not going to see a single speaker listed.
Yeah.
In fact, we don't tell anybody who the speakers are. And there's two reasons. There's sort of the strategical benefit to us, which is that if a speaker cancels, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But again, there's another thing. There was actually a learning that came out of that, which was in that second year, when we got that email and we were devastated and we thought, oh gosh, how are we going to deal with this? People are going to be livid. They're going to want their money back. They're going to bankrupt us. Not a single person asked about this individual. Hey, when's this person doing the keynote speech? So what we learned is it's actually not all that important. And it only becomes important when you put it on a pedestal on your page and you use that as a means to sell tickets. But that's actually what crafted this vision that we have of attendee first. The attendees are the people that are important, not the speakers. And because we get so many incredible attendees, we can pull from that group to be part of the group that does engage in speaking roles, but we craft them in untraditional ways. So as I said, it's not people up on a stage with a microphone. It's someone around the fire giving some insight about something that they're extremely knowledgeable about and can teach about. But the core to that, as I say, is that the event is not crafted around those individuals. And that was a huge learning for us and has now become a big strength of ours.
That is awesome. I love that. And there's something that a lot of event organizers can bring from that, but it's more than just event organizers. I think this is about building community and connection. And this is one of the critical components of boundless leadership, is that we're not in this alone. And that if we're going to create something that's meaningful and has an impact on the planet, that we need community around us and we need to be able to connect in authentic ways. And it sounds like you've created a beautiful container for that. So well done.
Yeah, well, that's one of, I think if you want to, or if you recognize with the intuition that when people experience something together, that's how you create that boundless leadership. Then putting people in a place where literally the nearest town is a half an hour drive away, and they stay in these cabins together, and they all get up at 8 a.m. when the music starts playing to go to the mess hall and eat. the whole experience from start to finish is crafted in a way that it's experienced together and jointly. And so I think you hit the nail on the head there in the way that you characterized it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so tell me, for our listeners, what's the website for your event and when is it?
So it's firesideconf.com. It takes place September 6 to 9, 2018, which are the same dates as your wonderful event. And it sounds like that's going to be fantastic as well. We do have an application process. So we receive far more applicants that want to come to Fireside than we can accept. This year, we are sticking with the same number that we had last year, which is 400. The venue that we're at holds about 1,000 or so. But we really think it's important to have a small community where everyone can get to know each other and have an experience together. And I think you would agree that you can't do that with 1,000 people. So we're very selective. We have an application process, but we are looking to find incredible, driven entrepreneurs, founders, CEOs from all over the world that are looking to grow, but more importantly, have something to give to the community. We're looking for people that want to give more than they want to take. And if you can bring together a number of people that share that mentality, you're going to have an incredible community.
Yeah, fantastic. That's beautiful. And I love that sort of give and take philosophy. Have you read Adam Grant's book, Give and Take?
I have not, but it sounds like I really should.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You should get that book immediately. It's really good. His main premise is that givers are the most successful people, not takers. And there's a third type of person, which are matchers, people who give to receive, and they like to give and receive in equal measure. And his research has shown that the most successful people are those who give, and the least successful people are the ones who also give, because there's some givers who give and burn out. So he says, right, those who are successful are those who give ambitiously for others and are also ambitious for themselves. So they'll seek out assistance as well as giving assistance, but it's not in a tit for tat way. It's like, I'm happy to help you. And they'll find somebody else and they'll ask for advice. And it sounds like that's what your event has crafted in itself.
Well, I love that. I'm going to check out that book, and thank you for the recommendation.
You're welcome. Daniel, you've been fantastic. I wish you all the best of luck. We'll put all the links up on the podcast page, and that will be at zoerouth.com/podcast/fireside. So thanks again.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having us on.